Hello everyone and welcome to this video on creating light scenes for your keyshot renders. What we're going to look at today is how you can set up a basic 3-point light studio that is used by the majority of photographers when setting up their own photo shoots. So when lighting a scene in Keyshot, it is good to think like you would if you were a product photographer and how you may set up the different lightings, the different filters on there to try and get the effects that you're after and really make your product stand out. As well as being able to put in kind of actual light sources, it is good to have dark areas within your scene to also emphasize those shadows. So that's why to begin with, we're going to focus on the HDRI, and my background here has a black to grey gradient. Now I'm just going to reduce the ceiling down a little bit, so more of it is in darkness, but I'm also just going to kind of increase the flooring just so the base of that model is lit up. So with your background, there is still a light that is emitted. However, if you start off with a completely black background, then obviously there is no light being emitted there. Once we are happy with the initial background, I can then start to bring in those different light sources. So if I click on the crosshairs button here, it will then activate the set highlight option, and holding down the control key, I can click where I'd like that first light to focus on. Underneath the table, I can then play around with different parameters to manipulate what that light source is. So I can, for example, increase the size of it. I can use the canvas at the top to manipulate the positioning. And I can change the brightness of it. Now with positioning it, as I mentioned, you can use the canvas, but also with the set highlight option still activated, if you just hold down the left mouse button and drag across your model, wherever your mouse is focusing on is where that light will then target. Okay, so there are two ways of being able to manipulate that light to where you want it to be. Now by default, light sources come in as a white light, but you are able to change the color by clicking on the color box. Now you could pick any color from the swatches or using the table at the top. However, there is also a color space called Kelvin, which is a similar color scheme to what you'll find in most light bulbs. So here you can specify anywhere between kind of like a warm orange light source all the way through to a kind of blue colder light source. So depending on what materials and colors are within your scene is which one you might kind of jump more towards. So if I just, for example, set it to there, it's more of a kind of a neutral, slightly bluish light, which can bring out more of the white of this particular model. Now this first light here is called the main light. It's the one that is going to kind of provide the most illumination in the scene, and it helps draw the eye to a specific area of your model. Now when you add your main light in, you may find that it starts to cast shadows, which can add either extra detailing or even just lose some detailing on that model. That's when you then add in a secondary light, which is known as a fill light. So again, holding down the control key, I can then just left click on the model to bring in that light source. Now with this light source, when doing it via that method, it will duplicate the previous pin, so the values are all going to be the same, down to the size, color, and brightness. Now with the fill light, as I said, these tend to be used to help reduce or remove unwanted shadows. And generally, brightness-wise, it's anywhere up to a half the brightness of that main light. The reason being it therefore doesn't take focus away from where that main light is pointing. The fill light does not need to be the same color as the main light. In fact, you may want to have a contrasting color, again, to help make whatever materials or colors of those materials stand out even more. Now, the third type of light that you normally bring in at this 3-point lighting option is known as the backlight. And what it does is it can help reduce and remove those shadows from the back of the model, making it stand out a little more from the background. Okay, so for this one, again, I can just add a pin in, and then I can start to manipulate on that canvas whereabouts I want it to be. Now, at the moment, if I go to my settings tab, I can see that my background is set to color, so I cannot see the lighting environment. If I just change this to lighting environment, then when it comes to moving that pin, it's a lot clearer to see when it's going to be behind my model. And so it's a bit easier to then position where I want it to be. When I'm happy with the rough positioning, I then can jump it back to colour so it goes back to how it was before. So again here, back to the HDRI editor, I may want to kind of reduce the brightness down a little bit, again to be less than what the main light is, so we don't remove focus, but still bright enough to have that highlight around the edging to make it stand out from the background. Now with your lighting as well, you could add in a gradient pin if needed. And with the gradient pins, what you can do is you can add colouring there. So if I just start to kind of reposition this colour, I can click on this crosshairs to then focus whereabouts I want it to be. And then we can see here as it goes from kind of a red to a blue, the effect that it is putting on that model within there. With your gradients, there is also an opacity option. So it goes from kind of black to white in this situation. And if I click on those squares, I can then have the option to change what the stop opacity is. So if it's set to 0, it means it's completely transparent. Whereas if I bring it up to 1, it's more of an opaque light, and you can see it's more of an obvious light coming through. Okay, so that's kind of the power that you've got with your gradients. So here, for example, if I wanted, I could change this more to like a yellow, go more onto like a light grey, so it's more subtle. And then it can then also help emphasize kind of the material type that's been used for this particular scene. And that's how you can set up a 3-point light studio using that HDRI editor. Now with your HDRI editor, what it can do is create soft lighting and softer shadows to help bring out parts of your model. You can also create this same scene using physical lighting. So to show that, firstly what I'm going to do is open up my library, and under the environments, find the all black 4K and drag and drop that into the environment table. So this will kind of make the whole thing dark, and that's because this black environment has no light in it whatsoever. And all the light sources now are going to come from the physical lights that I add in. Under the Edit drop-down menu, I will find the Add Light option. And here we've got something called a planar light, which I'll be using for this demonstration. So when I bring in the planar light, by default, it always goes to the kind of base of the screen, and it will open up the light positioning tool. Along the bottom, I've got different position presets, and these ones are all based on where your camera angle is. So I could have the light coming from the left of the scene, or I could have it going from the right. Along the top, I've got different options for how to move that light afterwards. So for example, if I click on Orbit, and just zoom out so we can see the plane, if I hold down the Control key and use the left mouse button, I can then start to rotate that light source round based on that target location that I clicked on. Again, holding down the Control key and using the scroll wheel, I can zoom that light away or bring it closer. And if I double click on that plane, I can then see all the parameters used to change it, and holding down the Control and Shift key using the scroll wheel, I can either make that light source brighter or reduce the power. With the planar lights, you've also got the option to change the different angles. So here I can see I've got the different drag handles, and if I just grab these blue ones, it will then change my horizontal angle, and the red ones is a vertical angle. So you can focus in where you want that light source to aim at. Similar to the HDRI, you can change the colour. So I could add in either a colder light or a warm light, depending on the look that I'm going for. And when I'm happy with my selection, I can hit OK, and I can see the effect that it's having on there. Now, when setting up the 3-point light with physical lights, you can see when you've got your main light in, there is a stronger shadow compared to the HDRI lighting. So in this case, we definitely need to add a fill light in so we can see what is happening at the back of this scene. So if I bring in another plane light, this time I can say I want it shining in from the left. And again, clicking on that orbit and holding down the Control key, I can then start to reposition where I want that light source to be. When I'm happy with the positioning, I can just edit that light. I can just reduce the brightness of it within there. And I can also play around with the colouring. Now with the colour, as well as it being part of the Kelvin scale, if I'd like, I could always go to textures, select the colour option, and add something on like a colour gradient. So if I was following it similar to what I did with the HDRI pins, I can change this first one to a yellow and the second source to more of a lighter grey. And at the moment, this colour gradient is going planar, so it's going from yellow to grey. Again, to follow suit with the HDRI pins, I can change this to spherical, and then it will be a yellow source in the middle going out to grey. Now here you can play around with the scale, and you can also manipulate where these colour dots are if you want to have more of this case in the yellow source compared to the grey. Then the final light source we want to add in again is that backlight, just to add those highlights in on the side. So again, I can add in another plane source. And this time I want the light to face directly at the camera. And if I edit that light source, click on this little link next to width and height, I can then increase the width of that so it's the size that I want it to be. Again, I can reduce the brightness down a little bit, and if I wanted, I can change the colouring. Maybe I'll go for a bit of a warmer light on this side. Now at the moment we can still see the light source, which is probably not what we want in our final image. So a good thing with the planar lights is under the advanced drop down, you can tick or untick the visible to camera option to then hide that. It's then clearer to see where those highlights are in certain areas. So if it is still a bit too bright or not bright enough, you can make those extra tweaks. So this is what the scene would look like if it was lit up just using the physical lighting. Now, one good thing that you can do is you can mix and match these environment HDRIs and physical lighting to give different effects, whether or not you want to have a stronger main light or darker shadows going on where your fill light is going to be. So as an example, just to demonstrate this, what I'm going to do is select that original environment. I'm just going to duplicate it. And then within here, I'm just going to remove the gradient pin and that main light pin. Going back to the scene tab, I'm just going to then turn off that main light. Actually, I'll turn off all the lights to begin with so you can see what the HDRI is just doing. And I'm just going to then turn that main light back on again so you see that we can mix and match the two. So I've now got a stronger highlight at the front, with therefore stronger shadows at the back. But then there's a nice subtle shadowing that the fill light from the HDRI is then giving in, so it's not quite as harsh. I hope you found this video useful. Thank you for listening.